You're listening to the House Hacking Podcast, the blueprint for one of the best financial life hacks there is. House hacking. If you are looking to get ahead financially or learn about the easiest way to get started with real estate investing, then you are in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of individuals from all walks of life that use house hacking to eliminate their housing costs and accelerating their path to financial independence. Your number one place for all things house hacking.
Kendra, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, how you doing? Where are you calling in from? What's life for you right now?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. We just moved here like right before the pandemic to be closer to family. My parents live here. They retired here. And the life with the pandemic is interesting because we have a 1-year-old. So we're like navigating being home all the time and not getting that like outside exposure that I think she needs at this time. So it's been a little difficult, but we're hanging in there.
Where'd you move from before you came from San Antonio?
Yeah, we lived in Washington, D.C.
Ah, okay. Big change.
Big change, especially to like move here and then be on lockdown.
I know you don't get to enjoy any of the stuff of like the new city of like going out and the restaurants and the shops and like parks and man. Well,
yeah.
I know it's been an interesting year for everyone. So, I mean, you got a really cool story. I mean, you had basically was 31, 32. You're able to leave your 9-to-5 job from real estate investing. And, I think there's this whole financial community aspect of folks trying to get to early retirement and doing it by investing in the 401k, the IRA, in a brokerage account. And while that is a quicker path than the traditional work for 30, 40, 50 years, when you can do it with real estate, it goes really, really quick. So, I mean, just for the folks that don't know you, what's this high level summary of who you are, how you got to that point, just sort of that big background, high level summary on you?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, my husband and I retired from our 9-to-5 jobs, and all thanks to real estate investing. And it's crazy because we never grew up just knowing we'd be real estate investors. We didn't come from families of investors. We stumbled into investing randomly after playing CashFlow. We went over to my aunt's house. She had the game CashFlow. We played it, and it was kind of like, why didn't anyone tell us this? We really were able to see how that game works. And in the game, you literally cannot win without investing in real estate.
I love that game. Like, we don't have kids, but like if I had kids, like I'm going to buy it and make them play it. Our nephew just turned 7. So he's getting to that point where like he's been playing the junior Monopoly and starting to grasp it a little bit. He'll still pick up like, well, I like this color, so I'm just going to buy this one versus like, I don't like this color, so I'm not going to buy it, but that's the better property. So, that's so cool that sort of started this real estate spark. All right. Sorry. Keep going.
No, definitely. And I mean, most real estate nerds, I mean, we all love that game, right? But my husband and I, we were working government jobs. So I went to undergrad, I went to grad school, I moved to DC, got a government job, met my husband, got married, bought a house. And then we were just kind of like, we've done everything. We've checked all the boxes, right? We have these good jobs. We have these degrees. We have a house. And we never imagined that we'd buy any other real estate. We're like, this is our house. This is what people do, right? You live in this house. You work until you're like 85. And then you retire and you live the life of your dreams then. And we were just kind of chugging along, played CashFlow, had this aha moment because in the game, you cannot win without investing in real estate. And we were able to see the power of passive income. And we're like, wait a minute, we have good salaries. Why aren't we making our money work for us? And we just started looking for our first rental property the next day, like played the game, started looking at rentals the next day. No training, no classes. We didn't know what we were doing, but we had this fire that was lit under us.
And how old were you at the time when you guys played the CashFlow game?
I think 26 or 27.
Mid-late 20s. That's so awesome. So was this like a game night, or was your aunt like, come on over, I want you to play a game? Or was it like, oh, we're having dinner and like, hey, why don't we play this little game together? I mean, how did that whole thing come about? And so she wasn't a real estate investor, but like, did she have this idea of like mastering personal finances? And I'm curious how that all
Yes.
just, developed.
Yeah, so she is probably the financial guru of our family, and she does have rental properties, but I wouldn't say she's like your typical real estate investor who goes out just looking for rentals. It's that she was in the military and moved quite a bit, and every time they
Yep.
would move, they would rent a house, right? And so she had rentals in that aspect, but it was that she knew the power of the game, and she's like, "Hey, come over, let's have dinner. Let me introduce you to this game." And I think she knew it would be life changing for us, but we didn't know what we were getting into, but it literally changed our lives.
So was it like this Amway multi-level marketing pitch that friends do? Like, come on over. We've got something we want to share with you. Great opportunity.
No,
Right.
not really. It was really like laid back and fun, and she just kind of let the game speak for itself. And then, yeah, the rest is history. It's crazy.
That's so awesome. So 27-ish, right in there. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
fast forward to 32, you're able to leave your 9 to 5. So, I mean, how were your personal finances before 27? I mean, were you guys putting money in the retirement accounts? I mean, were you
Oh,
living
yeah.
paycheck to paycheck, or did you sort of say, hey, we know we need to pay down debt and we're sort of doing okay? Or, I mean, what was the situation before the game?
Well, we didn't have any student loans. I had full rides for undergrad and grad school. My husband didn't have any student loans. He had paid his off. And his personal finances were always way better than mine. I mean, he had like near perfect credit. He generally, like, his savings was just amazing because he really didn't buy anything. Like,
Yeah.
he probably wear the same clothes. He'd probably be still wearing the same clothes from when I met him if it wasn't for me.
That's the dynamic with me and my wife. I could wear like the same 3 shirts, and she's like, no. We can be frugal, but
Exactly.
we're going to get you some good stuff. Don't worry.
Exactly. But me, on the other hand, I didn't realize the power of your credit score and how you could pay for those mistakes for years to come, especially when it comes to getting a mortgage and the interest rate. No one had ever explained that to me. And so I was pretty much living above my means. I won't say living paycheck to paycheck, but I wasn't managing my money correctly. And so it wasn't until getting into real estate investing and then having these conversations and playing cash flow that I was like, oh, wait, I need to clean this up. And then also, just with our combined finances as a married couple, we were like taking all these vacations. We were like building custom closets in our house. Like, I won't say silly things, but kind of silly because we didn't have any investments. And
Mm.
so it's kind of like we had to reframe our thinking. Like, okay, we were going to spend $5,000 to build like custom closets. Why? We could put that into something that would make money in our sleep.
Well,
So,
HGTV says you need it, so that's why. Yeah, right. So,
yeah.
all right, this is so awesome that cash flow is what sort of pivoted your mind shift.
Mhm.
All right, so the next day you went out and looking for real estate. I mean, how'd you get started? Was it you going to try to do a house hack? Had you heard of house hacking? The goal was, well, we like our house, so let's just go buy an investment property. I mean, walk us through a little bit of your mindset there.
Yeah, we had never heard of house hacking. We didn't even know the concept, the benefits, none of it. And we're kicking ourselves now because our first rental purchase was a duplex that had a tenant on one side and was empty on the other. The perfect opportunity for house hacking. And the crazier part about it is because we had not been saving to invest in real estate, because we just played a game and then jumped right into it. So we found our first property 3 months after playing that game, right? And the price was $228,000. It was a duplex. So the down payment on that, because it was a rental, we weren't house hacking, the down payment was like $57,000. And
Yeah.
it's like, who has that much money just lying around? We ended up borrowing that money from our retirement accounts to afford it, which gets controversial. Some financial gurus say it's a terrible idea. I would say anyone listening to this, please consult with a financial advisor. If you want to try to do that, please consult with a financial advisor. But it worked beautifully for us. But looking back, if we would have house hacked, we could have put down as little as like $8,000
Yeah.
rather than 57,000.
All right. So you bought this duplex. How many bedrooms and bathrooms were on each side of it?
Each has 1 bedroom, 1 bath, but one side of it had like a bonus room in the basement that could kind of be a bedroom.
Awesome. And then do you remember roughly what your payment was on that if you were, a
Hmm.
loan at 228, putting 57,000 down?
Yep, it was $1,025 a month.
Awesome. And then what were you getting for rents on each side?
We bought it with a tenant in it, and he was paying I think 1,100, And we were like, okay, cool. So he's pretty much covering the mortgage. We need to do some renovations on the other side. Let's kind of DIY the renovations and we'll be, breaking even. We can kind of slow roll it. But what happened was a week after we got the keys for that property, the tenant just left. Like he literally he just moved with no warning. And we were kind of like, wait a minute, how do we find tenants? We had never done any of this research. We're like, what do we do? Like, how do people even, how do we do a lease? Where's the stuff? Like, and so we ended up putting it on Airbnb in a moment of desperation. And it was the best thing that ever happened to us because we went from making $1,100 a month to like $3,000 or $4,000 a month. Definitely more turnover, more work and things like that. But we started making all this money because we were doing a short-term rental. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. We learned the hard way.
Well, you were lucky that the Airbnb was an idea that was out there for you and that was able to solve it. So, I mean, do you still own that property today?
Yeah, we still own it. Right now we have 2 long-term tenants. And it's funny with the Airbnb, I had the idea to do it and my husband was like, no, who's going to stay in Airbnb in this neighborhood? Because when we bought it, it was a pretty, I guess it's relative. It was a rougher neighborhood in the city. And he's like, no one's going to stay here. And I was like, yes, if we make it nice, if we price it right, if the guests are able to meet us, like it's going to be a hit. And it was. We were like booked out. We barely ever had an empty day. Yeah, but now we have 2 long-term tenants in there just because we're long distance landlords now and we self-manage. It was just easier to nix Airbnb.
All right. So you started with the duplex, you tapped your retirement accounts. So where'd you go from here in your investing career?
So then we started seeing how much money we could make and we're like, we need to do this again. This is amazing. And we got a real estate agent and we were looking around at properties and we're like, man, trying to see what we could afford, And she was like, well, if you buy a multi-unit and you live in one, then you can put down less and use FHA. And we're like, well, wait a minute, what? So that's where it came from, just a random comment from a real estate agent. Because we were originally thinking at that time that we were going to need to go in with a partnership with my sister-in-law to afford our next place. That's how we were. And we couldn't agree on some things. Like she wanted to do things one way. We had a different idea and we're kind of hitting this kind of stalemate. And the real estate agent was like, you guys can get your own multi-units, right? And you just live in it. And that's how we got into house hacking. So the next property was a 4-unit and we did house hack it.
So this realtor, I mean, was the realtor an investor? Did she actually call it house hacking or did she just say like, by the way, if you buy it and live in it, you can use an FHA loan? Because this sounds like the golden realtor of like, if you ever need a good realtor, this sounds like the one that's like, hey, did you know you can do it this way?
No, she didn't say house hacking, but she just said, you can get an FHA loan and you only have to put down 3.5%.
That's so awesome. Very savvy realtor. All right. So the 4-unit, was it in a better part of the city, worse part of the city? I mean, what'd you buy it for? Did it need work?
Yeah, so I would say it was a little better part of this, it was a tad bit better, but what happened was as soon as we bought it, like DC has been gentrifying like crazy. I mean, the gentrification business has been so rapid. And so the area that we bought our 4-unit in changed drastically just within 6 months of us purchasing it. We purchased it for $800,000. I think our down payment was like 17 or 20. It was somewhere between $17,000 and $20,000 down. And we lived in one. The other units were already rented out. And we walked into it with $200,000 in equity. It appraised for, I think it appraised for 1.1 right when we bought it. And it was just an amazing situation that we walked into. But I will say though, the mindset shift for me was very hard to come to, like moving from our big house that we had with a garage and a backyard, and we had a movie theater room and our custom closets that cost like thousands of dollars, to moving into an apartment and like sharing walls with tenants. It was very hard for me to get to that point with being okay with that. My husband, he was ready. Like I think men are, tend to be much more like simple when it comes to like their living arrangements. And I'm like, I don't want to downsize. But if it wasn't for doing that, we would not have been able to retire. We would not have reached financial freedom. And so it was definitely pivotal for us.
Yeah. And all right. So this 4-unit, 800,000, were all the units identical, or how many bedrooms and bathrooms were in each of the units?
Now, this is where it gets good because this is not your typical 4 unit. It used to be a 5 unit. And so I'm trying to think how I can explain it. The owner suite was actually 2 levels, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. It had 2 entrances. So we had our own separate entrance that walked out to the street. We had a deck on the back. I mean, this isn't like
I
when
was
I'm,
about to
I'm
say, I
going,
was like, it doesn't, I mean, I get it was probably a downsize from your house, but this is sounding pretty nice right here.
exactly. We don't find places like this. And so I'm whining about like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna, but that's just how like stuck I was in my ways. But it was a pretty good size apartment. And so it had that owner suite, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, and then it had a 2 bedroom and 2 1 bedrooms. So yeah,
Okay. And then did you do the FHA loan for this?
we did. Yep.
And here's something for folks that are listening that might not realize this. So there's a couple things here. The FHA loan limit varies depending on where you're at in the country. So now if you're in Iowa, you're probably the FHA loan limit is not going to probably be $800,000. So it increases for a 1 unit. It goes a little higher for 2 unit, goes a little higher for 3 unit, and goes a little higher for 4 unit. And then they also base it on the area of the country that you're in. So obviously the DC metro area is more expensive.
Yeah.
And then, the other thing is, you guys are on government jobs. There's 2 of you making a decent income, but you were able to qualify for an $800,000 loan because you had some additional qualifying income is what I'm assuming here from the other units. Is that correct?
That's a really good point. Yes. And because of the way that they calculate the income based on the rental income you're going to receive from that property that you're getting when you're house hacking, they're able to factor in that rental income. They're able to factor in the rental income from our duplex. And then we were renting out our house that we had originally lived in, that single family. And so you're right. That did help.
So usually with a loan, depending, it's going to vary from program to program.
Yes.
They'll use about 75% of that. So as an example, if you're just going to buy a duplex and that other side's renting for $1,000 and there's a tenant in there and they've got the lease, the underwriter will use 75% of that for qualifying income. So now all of a sudden you have an extra $750 of that 1,000 can count to help you qualify for the loan. So when you bought it, was the owner's unit empty and then the other units were rented, or what was the mix of vacancy in there when you purchased it?
The owner's unit was empty and it had been empty for so long. There was actually like mold issues and things like that. So that was pretty scary. We had to get that remediated before closing and all that stuff. So the owner's unit was empty, and then the other 3 units were all occupied with Section 8 tenants. And so we moved into that owner's suite.
Awesome. And then what was the rent that you're getting from those other 3 units roughly?
I don't remember exactly, but I would say it was about probably between $1,800 to $2,000. But what happened was, because like I said, DC is gentrifying so quickly, every redevelopment everywhere, the market area rents within like 6 months of us purchasing doubled. And this was something we could not have predicted. And so the numbers worked for us, even with the market rent as it was when we purchased it. But thankfully, they just like doubled, and Section 8 started paying more, like literally within 6 months of us purchasing it. So we were making up to like $4,000 just for 1 unit.
Wow.
Yeah, that's because, like you said, DC is so expensive. And I tell people all the time, like when you hear my numbers and how much rental income we were making, you have to make sure that you understand like, the costs associated with that, the 4 unit are going to be different, but it's just in a more expensive area. So you can't say, well, I'm not going to house hack because I'm not going to make $4,000 a month, but every area is different. You have to do what works for you and where you live.
I mean, if you can house hack and even cut your housing expenses in half, to me, that is a win, right? Because, you can save an extra $500 a month. That lets you max out an IRA, and do that for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then that'll turn into $500,000, $700,000, $800,000 nest egg. It's huge. So do you remember roughly what your payment was on this? Taxes, insurance, principal, interest?
Yeah, about $5,000. And so I think at the peak of how much we were making about $12,500 a month in rental income. And then we had the $5,000, about $5,000 a month in expenses. And then, so netting about 7,000.
Yeah. So you're essentially pocketing $5 or $7,000 a month before maintenance, CapEx, and, potential vacancy. But I mean, even after you factor in, like, putting away money for maintenance, for CapEx, for your self-managing. But if you want to hire a property manager, there's a ton of margin in there. I mean,
Yep.
that's killer. So at this point, did you realize, okay, we know how to find the tenants, or did the Section 8 tenants stay in there? And I mean, what's your thoughts on Section 8? I mean, how did it work out for you? I used to do a ton of affordable housing, and I've sort of got my own thoughts on it, but there definitely seems to be a stigma against Section 8. And some people either love it or hate it. I mean, where do you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, I love it when you can pick the tenants yourself. And I don't want to scare anyone from buying occupied rental properties, because we purchased 3 so far. Buying an occupied property, a property with tenants already in it, can be amazing. But in this instance, it had the Section 8 tenants in it, and we ended up putting all of them out and then choosing our own Section 8 tenants. So we did keep a Section 8 because, first of all, in DC, Section 8 pays at the top of the market. Whatever the market rent is, the very top of that, they're going to pay you that. And that was just a beautiful thing for us. And also, like I said, if you can select the Section 8 tenants and you can do your own due diligence, I think it could be an amazing thing. I think the scary part for us was moving into this building and then putting people out who then know where we live, and if they're going to be disgruntled, are they going to come back and like find us? But it worked out. Nothing crazy happened, but we did have to put them out and get our own tenants, or get new tenants.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I essentially had the same experience. I didn't house hack and do affordable housing, but when I did Section 8 is you can actually screen the tenants. Just because they're Section 8, you do Section 8, you're not forced to take them.
Yep.
And while they have some vetting done on them because they have to qualify for the program, you put them through your own screen, and then that rent, when it shows up automatically every single month, is a really, really nice thing. And then, one of the other things that I always hear about Section 8 is they're so picky and they make you fix a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be fixed. Did you ever have any issues like that with Section 8 there in DC?
No, I will say one of the biggest issues we had was these different Section 8 tenants coming from situations where they had like slumlords, and they were just so jaded that their attitude toward the relationship with us, it was an uphill battle. And we kept trying to reinforce, like, we're not like your old landlords. We're on your side. We really want to like help you and work with you. And so that for us was really hard. I say another thing that we dealt with was like managing different personalities in a building. I mean, just that, tenants not they're too loud and stuff like that. That's one thing that no one ever really told me to think about when buying a multi-unit. It's like, you got to manage these different personalities and complaints. But I will say for Section 8 too, I think the landlords who have Section 8 now during this pandemic are like really thankful, because it's like almost pandemic proof. Section 8 is paying. There's no question. Yeah. A lot's going to happen for you not to get your money from Section 8 on the first of the month. And so, people will talk down about it, but it's like a sure thing.
Yeah, that was one of the challenges that I had as well, is folks, when they're in the affordable housing and every other, like, I would buy properties where, I mean, literally, I remember walking in this one unit, they were flushing their toilet by filling up a bucket in the tub. It was literally like a $20 toilet flapper rebuild kit in about 30 minutes to get it done. And it just like blew my mind, but it was, the landlord is here to just take my money and screw me over.
Yeah.
And trying to say, look, I'm not perfect, but I will try to do everything I can to make the place livable. And I found once I started getting that traction of like, oh, Andrew's actually a decent landlord.
Yeah.
So did you do any soundproofing as well to like help with those tenant to tenant relation issues, or was it just something that you learned to develop to sort of be the middle ground there and mediate?
We tried. I was researching so much stuff, and really for myself too, because I'm very noise sensitive. And so house hacking for me was a major sacrifice. Like living below people, I hate living on the bottom floor, and that's where the owner's suite was. And so I was like, but it's nothing it was going to cost an arm and a leg. Like it just wasn't cost effective. And when you live in an apartment, even if you live in a brand new apartment building, you're sharing walls, and sharing walls is tough. Even if you live in a condo that you own, like you're sharing walls, right? And so, no, we didn't end up doing any soundproofing things, but we just had to kind of reinforce, like, please be mindful of your neighbors, like quiet time after 10 o'clock kind of thing. But,
Yeah, if you're ever buying multifamily, I always found up and down, there's almost always going to be noise issues when someone's over someone else, even if they're super quiet. is always going to be a challenge. And like you said, it doesn't make sense to spend the money a lot of the times. It's so expensive unless you're already in the middle of a renovation and opening up
Yes.
walls. And then there is this incremental cost, but we just got done renovating our fourth house hack. And while we were doing it, it was a lot of work. You know, we put soundproof insulation in the walls that we opened up.
Mm.
A couple of the walls we didn't open up because we were going to be doing drywall repair. We put the mass load vinyl and a new sheet of vinyl or a
Wow.
drywall on the shared wall, and it really helps. But yeah, it just doesn't make sense if to just do it straight out. This is a really cool story. I love the fact that you were making like $7,000 in cash flow before, you know, maintenance and CapEx and stuff. This is really
Yeah.
killer. So how was the lease process working with Section 8 tenants in at this point? You know, how'd you figure out to start doing leases? Because I remember when you said your other one, it was like, oh my goodness, the tenants left, and you did short-term rental where you don't really do leases because it's all through VRBO, Airbnb.
Yeah.
So how'd you sort of develop and figure out how to do leases and do screening and background and all of that stuff?
Well, thankfully, my husband, part of his job in the government, he wrote contracts for a living. And so writing a contract and reviewing it was nothing new for him. We just went and got a template online somewhere and then edited it. And I'm trying to figure out if it was not for him having that skill, what would we have done? I mean, I know you can buy them from places online and like get a lawyer to draft it up, but that's another advantage we had, that he literally, that was his job, to write contracts. And so he created a lease for us and we just kind of used it from there. But I think screening was just, you just Googled. Like, that's why people are so fortunate to have like a podcast like yours and these different resources online, because back then these things weren't as common. And so you kind of just were out there figuring it out.
Give it a try. Let's see if this works. And yeah. So quick tip for folks. Easy Landlord Forms is a company that I've been using for a decade. They have lawyers that actually write all the contracts. They're not only state specific, but they also have county or parish specific, because you'll have slightly different rules from county to county, even inside of the same state. And then I love it because when you're going through, it'll say, oh, you're collecting a deposit. Do you know your state requires you to put a deposit in a trust account? Or did you know you have to return your deposit within 14 days based on your state? So it has all these little cool tips in there to help you. You know, and it costs like $20 or $30 for a customized lease. So it's definitely worth the money.
A lot of landlords in DC don't realize that you have to put that deposit in a savings, in an interest-bearing savings account. And when your tenant moves out, you know, if they don't damage anything or you minus any damages, you have to return them that deposit plus the interest. And especially when you're buying an occupied property too, you need to make sure you're getting that deposit back from the landlord. If they took a deposit, that deposit is now yours if you're inheriting that tenant, and people miss that entirely.
100%. You got to get that transferred on the closing statement.
Yeah.
So much good stuff here. So obviously, did you live up in that house until you moved to San Antonio, or did you move on to another property before then?
Yeah, we lived in there for a year, and then my husband's job moved us to Fort Worth, Texas, and we were there for a year. And while we were in Fort Worth, we were like, I think we can retire now. Like, I think we had reached financial freedom. Like, at that point, we were kind of doing the calculations, and neither one of us liked our jobs at all. I was working from home. My job let me work from home in Fort Worth. And we're like, all right, let's do it. Let's quit. We're going to go travel the world for a year. And we did. So after living in Fort Worth, we decided to go ahead and quit. I went back to DC to go ahead and start the process to quit my job. And then we found out we were pregnant. So it's like, we can't travel for a year now. So we're like, shoot, okay, plan B, we're going to do something else. And so we, I guess that was a bad choice of words saying plan B, but
I know.
Change of plans. So we're not going to travel for a year, but we still went ahead and, you know, left our government jobs. And then we stayed in DC for a little bit, kind of just making sure all our properties were good and things like that. Had the baby there in DC, and then moved back to Texas. Now we're in San Antonio. So kind of all over the place there, but yeah.
Good question here is, what'd you actually do with the money that you were making? So you're both have your government jobs and you were essentially living off of that before. As you started looking at the cash flow game and doing that first property, you realize like, hey, we need to work on our finances and spend our money differently. I mean, so you had a couple of properties at this point and we're making a good amount of cash flow. So was this more custom closets? I mean, did you deck out the owner suite? I mean, were you guys driving super nice cars to your government job? I mean, what'd you do with
No.
that extra cash flow that was coming in every month?
We actually sold our cars and downsized to a one-car household to even save more money. And then we took money from, money that we were making from rental income, took money from selling our cars, and we bought another rental. We bought that in cash. We bought a condo in Baltimore, Maryland. And so even to this day, we're still a one-car household, even though it's like DC is a very like,
You got the metro. You can get around a little easier
yeah.
with
In
one
Texas,
car.
no, like you're not getting anywhere without a car, but it just still works for us. But yeah, no, we didn't really upgrade our lifestyle at all. We just have really kept it super basic, but it's worked for us.
Awesome. And then, thinking back from the investing that you've done, I mean, what do you think like the biggest mistake was? Or like, if you could go back and like sort of smack yourself awake and be like, hey, young me, do this differently. What might that actually be?
Ooh, two things. One, I wish we would have known about like down payment assistance programs when we bought our house, right? There's so many things, there's so many programs and resources out there people can use to lower or eliminate that down payment. But then just if we would have house hacked first,
Yes.
right? And then just kind of gotten that out the way. But I will say, I guess it was a blessing in disguise, because if we would have used an FHA loan for that first duplex, it would not have been available to us for that
Excellent.
4-unit unless we would have refinanced or sold it or whatever. But yeah, using down payment programs would have been really beneficial to help us leverage other funds. And then house hacking, and then for my way younger self, like stop living above your means, stop swiping that credit card. So,
That's most of us when we're younger. Those folks that are like 23 and have it all figured out and have been saving,
yeah.
and like I said this a couple of times before on the podcast. I literally remember when I was 20 years old, the month I moved into my house, my commission check after taxes was like 12 grand. And I basically spent all of it. And my mindset was like, well, I've got another commission check coming next month and there's still money in my account. Like,
Yeah.
well, you got to spend it because there's more coming. The concept of saving and investing more just didn't quite click yet.
Yeah.
So, over your investing career, what do you think like your biggest win was? What was the thing that was like, this was our, I guess, thing that really sort of put us on the right path, or the biggest win that you feel like moved the needle, the biggest thing for you?
I would say house hacking the 4-unit, just because we were able to eliminate our living expenses, which was huge. And then that really catapulted like our net worth and the cash flow, like all of that. I think that would be it. But for me now, it's being able to like educate people and teach them and allow them to learn from my mistakes. That's huge for me now. Like it's so powerful, because anyone listening to this podcast episode is already starting out better than I did. That's huge. You're already starting out better than me, and I retired at 32. So wow, like.
And I love all the stuff you share on your Instagram channel as well. So we'll make sure to put all your social media handles in the show notes and stuff. But yeah, I've been love following you on social media.
Thanks.
Before we let you go, we like to ask all of our guests a set of final 6 questions. Are you ready for them?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So question number 1, what is your favorite personal finance related blog, book, or podcast?
Oh, personal finance. I would say The One Thing is one of my favorite books. That's a good book to check out. The One Thing.
We'll link to it in the show notes for folks.
Okay.
It's a great book. All right. So question number 2, what is your favorite real estate related blog, book, or podcast?
The House Hacking Podcast.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Awesome. All right. Question number 3, what has been your favorite travel destination so far?
Costa Rica.
Oh, awesome. Where'd you go in Costa Rica?
Well, I can't even remember. Now you put me on the spot on that one. I can't remember, but we stayed at some resort and it was amazing.
Awesome. All right. So question 4, and I'll modify this one slightly for you. So, post COVID, also post when baby gets old enough to travel with, what's next on your travel destination?
We want to go to Germany because my husband was born there. He's a military brat and he was born in Germany and hasn't been back since then. So we're like, we want to go to Germany.
Awesome. Does he have a dual citizenship?
No, because he's born on a military base. So.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So question number 5, what's the biggest bucket list item that you have not accomplished yet?
Biggest bucket list item would be skydiving.
Awesome. It's a good one. All right. And then number 6, what is your favorite life hack?
Favorite life hack is to make money in my sleep. That's the ultimate life hack. Making money without exchanging time for it.
Awesome. Awesome. Great one. All right. Thank you so much for being on the show today. If people want to find you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can find me at The Key Resource on Instagram. Once you find me on Instagram, everything you need is right there in the link in my bio. You can DM me if you heard me on this podcast. If you have any questions, I would love to chat with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for being on the show. This was awesome. It's such a cool story. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Awesome.